What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. No, this one's a little bit different than normal because I usually do these kind of things on like my GoPro with a full setup and stuff. But today we're doing a webcam and microphone thing because today we're gonna be going online and ranking all of the special golf models, whether they be base, GTE, GTD, GTI, Rs, everything in between, on a tier list to talk about which ones I think are the best and where I rank these cars personally. So we're going to get started with that here in a moment, but just to preface this is kind of just a bit of filler content, but still kind of fun, just to break things up since it's been kind of difficult to do videos during this holiday season because obviously I've been spending money on Christmas gifts and stuff like that, and that obviously takes away from buying parts for the car. And considering parts of this car for these platforms are fairly expensive, something that I'm not used to from my old platform. I used to have a Ford pickup truck, so you can imagine how cheap parts were. Depending on how you look at that, because you could buy a bunch of crappy parts for any car really, and that includes even the GTI. But I'm trying to put better parts on this car than I did my Ford. But today we're just going to be ranking all of the cars. This tier list only goes up to the 7.5 gen cars, so pretty much anything outside of that we're not going to actually have. So the Mark 8s unfortunately are excluded from this, but pretty much everything up until the Mark 7.5 is on here. So let's get started. Alright, so here we are on this tier list. We're going to start off pretty much from the oldest cars. So unfortunately, this isn't laid out in order of release. This is actually just kind of random, but just by judging down here, I'm going to be looking very closely. So we've got the Mark 1 GTI. Now, or actually, we'll start with the Mark 1 Golf because it is, of course, the Mark 1. And this is just kind of your base Mark 1 Golf. I really don't know where to put this one because, in my opinion, the Mark 1 is kind of just there. Obviously, the GTI is what I pay most attention for. But the Mark 1 is like not bad by any means, like the original. So we're going to kind of pop this in fourth, I think. For now, we'll pop it in the fourth tier. And then if I change my mind later, I'll change my mind later. Mark 1 GTI is so iconic and that I think it kind of deserves a pretty high spot on the list because it's the Mark 1. It's the OG. This is where the GTI got started. And I know a lot of people hate these things now because there are people out there that hate old cars. I'm the same kind of guy who likes the 69 and 60, like the early old standard bugs. So I do hold a special spot for the Mark 1s. I would love to do a VR6 Mark 1 GTI at some point in my life. So this is actually going to go up into second tier because I do believe there are cars better than it, but I do hold a soft spot for it, which is why it's not in the fourth tier as well. So moving on to the Mark II. Now I think this is a Mark II right here. So the Mark II, in my opinion, it's a mixed bag to me. Part of me loves it, part of me hates it. But I am going to go ahead and give it the benefit of the doubt. And I'm going to put the base Mark II with the Mark 1 in that fourth tier and the Mark II GTI in that third tier. So moving on to the Mark III. So the Cabrio. Now, I actually really like the Cabrio models. I prefer the Mark IV Cabrio over the Mark III. This is high on my list of cars I want to build at some point. I really like the Cabby. But the Mark III Cabrio, I'm going to go ahead and put it in that third tier as well. Because quite frankly, it is still the less ideal of the Mark III platforms. Obviously, the GTI VR6, which I believe is right here. I don't know if you guys can actually see. It may actually be this one down here. I think this may actually be just a base one. I think that actually might be the GTI. This might actually be the GTI. This one is just your run-of-the-mill Mark III, so this one's going to go in third tier as well. Mark III GTI, I believe is what this is. Unfortunately, the Mark III did not do a great job about differentiating between a base car and a GTI model. It's going to go in that second tier because I do like the GTI VR6 and the Mark III gen. That is a soft spot for me. Now, this car, I have no clue what this is, quite frankly, so I'm just going to drop it here. If I don't know where it is, if I don't even know what it is, it's going in that fifth tier. So we're gonna move on this one as well because I find these two specifically ugly and I don't understand why they're here in the first place. Sorry. So Mark IV. So the Mark. Okay, we got one more Mark III. It's a wagon, and now we didn't. I don't believe we. I have never seen a Mark III wagon. So it's gonna go up here because I think it's cool. Same for this. This weird thing is also going down here. The Mark III or Mark IV wagon also gonna go here. Actually, ahead of both of these. I don't think I've ever seen a Mark IV wagon here, but I could be wrong on that. All right, so moving on to the Mark IV cars, we've got the looks like I'm trying to see if the Mark IV has a GTI variant. That's very obvious to me. We'll just say this is the GTI. So Mark IV GTI shoot. I'm gonna put it at the top of second tier because I like the 1.8 and I think it's almost first tier, best tier, whatever you want to call it. But I do think that the Mark IV Gen is dominated by, of course, the car that I'm going to get to here in a minute. The Mark IV Cabrio, again, is a car that I really like. I do like it more than the Mark III, and it is going to go ahead of the Mark III in its entirety. I think I'm going to put it ahead of the wagon as well on that second tier. I really like the Mark IV Cabrio because it's just such a different platform versus the other Mark IVs. I mean, you've got so many versions of the Mark IV, and I would love to do a R32 swapped Cabrio. That's one of the things I really want to do, so I may actually do that at some point in the future. That might be what I choose to do for a project car one day. Who knows? I just really like the Cabrio and the Mark IV Cabrio specifically, so that'd be the car I would pick. Okay, so of course, now we're on to the end of the Mark IV. We have the Mark IV R32. Now, if you guys follow my TikTok, I did a video recently of like my top 5 dream cars. It was more asking for one specific car, but I just did 5 because I'm notorious for never being able to settle on a dream car. The Mark IV R32 is in that top 5. So, because of that, it's going to go in that first tier. I really like the Mark IV R32. It's such a cool car. It's a shame that they've become such a collector vehicle that they cost a fortune to get a hold of. It's insane. It costs so much to get a Mark IV R32 now. All right, so we're moving into the Mark V. So the Mark V base Golf. Now, controversial opinion, I really like the base Mark V Rabbit as it was sold here in the United States with the 2.5 liter 5-cylinder. You had an option of getting a 5-speed manual, which could easily be swapped to a GTI 6-speed. I really like this car, and it has been a constant, bug in my ear to get one of these for years now because I've just always liked 5-cylinders. I like Audi 5-cylinder specifically. It's the best 5-cylinder ever made. There is no contest on that. The Volkswagen Group has built the best 5-cylinders. There's no competition there. And that includes even the NA25 that's in the base Mark V Rabbit. So I am going to give it a bit of a controversial spot. It is going to go ahead of the Mark I GTI. It's going to still be behind the Mark IV because the Mark IV GTI does, obviously have a turbocharger that does convince me quite a bit to keep it higher up. So we also got, I'm looking through all these here, Mark V GTI. This is another car that's fantastic. It was probably the GTI that got me into GTIs. I grew up, I respected the Mark IV GTI. I thought it was really cool. But then the Mark V came out, and I, discovered it on Need for Speed Pro Street on DS out of all things, because I didn't see them very often around town when the Mark V first came out. And now obviously they're everywhere because they sold fairly well. They're fairly inexpensive now to get as builds, despite some of the mechanical reliability issues the Mark V's had. They're still very, very, very special cars to me. So the Mark V GTI is going to take over that second tier for now, ahead of the Mark IV. It really doesn't want to give up that spot, huh? So again, we're going to move on to the Mark V R32. Again, you guys already know how I feel about the R32. In fact, the Mark V R32 is another car that I've considered buying several times, actually, because they are considerably cheaper than Mark IVs. I mean, plus I believe they were more common, which is odd considering they were also 2-year exclusive cars. But the Mark V R32 is another car that I hold very dear to my heart, so it's also going to go in that top tier alongside the Mark IV, even if the Mark IV, in my opinion, is slightly better. Finally, we have this down here, which you guys probably have never seen unless you're that big of a VW enthusiast. The Mark V GTI W12. Now, this car is such an oddball because it's got like the rear subframe out of, I believe, a R8, the chassis off of a Gallardo, and then it's got a Bentley W12 in it, but with this Golf body on it. It was built for Wheelwell, which is just, a big VW event. Pretty much a lot of big Volkswagen concepts have been unveiled there. But according to Jeremy Clarkson, that thing sucks to drive. So I am gonna dock it a few points on that. but I am going to still put it in that top tier just because it was such an engineering marvel at the time. And Volkswagen used to just be so big on being experimental, and that was something I've always liked about VWs. They've been experimental, even if they experimented a little bit too good with the diesels. Um, so it obviously does, knock a few points off of everything. It just, the W12, one, not ever seeing production, two, being really bad to drive. So the last Mark V, it appears on the list that I can see easily, because these pictures are really small, is the Mark V Sport Wagon. Now, we do, I believe, have these in the States, and I think I used to see them fairly regularly. I think I see the Jetta more frequently, but I am just going to kind of toss it in here at the top of the third tier, because I like the Mark V as a, I prefer the Rabbit, of course, and of course the Mark V GTI 932, but I mean, it's there, and I, do kind of like it. But it does look like we've also got some EOSs in here, so we're going to take care of those. The EOS is such an oddball car for me, because like part of me is like, oh, it's cool, it's a hardtop convertible, but these things are the farthest thing from sporty VWs ever built. It's pretty much just take the concept of a CC, I believe, and just make it a drop top. I'm not terribly keen on them. I wouldn't necessarily say they're in the worst tier. Maybe like this one. Again, these pictures are so small, I'm having a hard time really picking out what they are. So that one will go there, because I just, don't really like it. But like this blue one here, it looks kind of like a Golf, like a Mark 6R from the front. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop it here, because quite frankly, I don't know anything about these things. EOSs are kind of one of those Volkswagens I didn't really pay attention to. So we're really down to the Mark 6 and Mark 7. So let's start off with the Mark 6 Sport Wagon, since that appears to be the lowest trim Mark 6 we have access to. Now again, this one is another car that I really like, because they've got so many different engine options. I think they had an earlier iteration of the 1.8 EA888 platform that we now have in the base Mark 7s. So I do think there's that. But of course, the 2.5 does carry. This is, again, another car that if I didn't get a Mark 5 2.5, I'd probably get a Mark 6 2.5 or a Beetle 2.5. Just, some sort of really cool 2.5 platform. It is going to go into that second tier ahead of the Mark 4 wagon. It's going to pretty much still be behind the Cabrio, though, because I do still like the Mark 4 Cabrio just a little bit more. All right, so next up on our Mark 6s is the Mark 6 GTI. Now, this car is a fairly sentimental one for me. The first time I've ever driven a GTI, or been inside of a GTI for that matter, was a Mark 6. I drove this last year off camera on the YouTube channel. I pretty much fully intended to buy this car, but it sold from underneath me, and I just wasn't able to get the paperwork done in time, because it was from a buy here, pay here, not like where my Mark 7 came from, which was a actual VW dealership. I wasn't able to pull that off, and it worked out, because I do like my Mark 7 more than I would have liked the Mark 6. There's just a little bit more reliability in the Mark 7 that I probably would have been disappointed with if I'd gotten the Mark 6. But the Mark 6 I looked at was great. It was a DSG, and it was red, which is, the hero color of the Mark 6. And sometimes I'm kicking myself for not getting a red Mark 7. Sometimes. I do like the black, but I think I do kind of wish I got a red one sometimes. Who knows? Maybe we'll wrap the car red. I don't know. I'm kind of torn if I want to wrap it and what color I want to wrap it at all. But Mark 6 GTI is going to go in the top of that second tier, just because it's a little bit more sentimental than the Mark 5, even though the Mark 5 is kind of the most nostalgic for me. The Mark 6 is definitely more sentimental because of the fact that, I almost bought one. So our final Mark 6 on this little group here. Actually, I say that we've got another Mark 6. I think this is just the base Golf, which I'm going to put here ahead of the Mark 5. We have the Mark 6R, which I feel like at this point you guys already know where this is going to go. It's going to go ahead of the W12, because this is a car that actually hit production. I do wish I could have experienced a Mark 6R. I've always wanted to drive a Mark 6R, but unfortunately I can't drive stick, and the US only got the Mark 6R in stick. I say I can't drive stick. The last time I drove stick, I did fairly well. It's just I don't have enough seat time in a stick car to really say I can drive stick. But the Mark 6R is going to go in that best tier ahead of the W12, behind the VR6 cars. I know that's probably going to tick some people off, because it's kind of a war between the two OT and the VR6 guys. But the VR6 stuff is just a little bit more timeless to me. But that rounds out the Mark 6. So now we're just down to Mark 7s, which there are a ton on this list. So on these pictures here. So we have the original Mark 7 base. Now this, of course, has the 1.8T. I believe these had a non-DSG automatic. I could be wrong on that front. I really haven't given a lot of time to the base golf. I think it's still DSG. These at first were terrible for tuning and stuff, but now they finally caught up because tuning companies like EQT and I believe Unitronic are starting to tune the 1.8Ts. So definitely they're a lot more viable now. I've met a few people that own them and they love them. I know a guy with an IS38 Sport Wagon 1.8T and it's very quick. So I am going to put it ahead of the. I really want to do it because I love the 2.5 more than the new 1.8T 888. I'm gonna put it ahead of the Mark 5 2.5, but not the Mark 6. So we're gonna move on to another base, Mark 7. We got a bunch of bases here. I believe this is the GTE right here. I don't know for sure. That is gonna go towards the middle of this list. I mean, I'm still gonna put it probably. I'm gonna probably put it ahead of the base Mark 7, but not any higher because at the end of the day, I'm not a hybrid guy. That's just not my thing. The issue I'm having is identifying which one's the GTD out of this group because again, this pictures are very small. I believe this is an R. So Mark 7R is just gonna go up here because again, R's just always are like amazing. I believe this is the Mark 7.5 Sport Wagon, so this is going to go in this area here. I'm going to put it ahead of the GTE. I believe that's a GTE. Like I said, I don't know for sure. And then I believe we have another base golf here. I believe this is the 7.5 base. So I'm going to put it ahead of the 7 base. So I have no clue which one of these is which. Obviously, this is a Mark 7 GTI. I think this is a 7.5 GTI. And this, I believe, is the GTD, so the diesel. I know this is a Club Sport S. But we're going to go ahead and do... Well, actually, no, that's actually a regular Club Sport. Oh, never mind, that is an S. It's a Club Sport S. So, Mark 7 GTD. I actually like this more than the GTE. I'm going to go ahead and put it... that's tough, because we don't get the GTD here, so I can't really say that from the U.S. perspective what it would be like. But I'm just going to put it here behind the Mark 6 2.5 because I just quite frankly don't know what to say about GTDs. I don't have one. Screw it. It's going ahead of the Mark 6. I do give the TDI group some credit. The TDIs is great. Mark 7.5 GTI now. This might seem a little bit biased because the Mark 7 GTI is what I own. So obviously the Mark 7 GTI and the GTI Mark 7.5 are going to be fairly high on this list. But for now, I'm going to put the 7.5 at the top of the second tier and the original Mark 7 at the top of, or the bottom. No, I can't do that. I'm biased, but I can't bring myself to do that. Now, the Club Sport S, the final car on this list. I am so torn on where to put the Club Sport S because it is such a fantastic car. It beat the Nürburgring front-wheel drive record. It stole it back from Honda after Honda took it from the Club Sport, the original Club Sport. Now the Club Sport S is like, as close to a GT3 RS you can get in a Golf. In my opinion, I really wish we got them here in the States. I would have bought one so fast. Golf R motor, so it's got the Mark 7 platform. It's the best of the Mark 7 platform. One thing is they aren't DSG, which is kind of an odd thing. They're only available in manual, which does harken back a little to the Mark 6R. Some people are going to love that it's manual only. I, on the other hand, I'm a DSG fanboy. I think that's fairly obvious if you guys watch my channel. I own a DSG Mark 7. The Club Sport S, though, the thing is it's such a great car. But my love for the VR6 is kind of holding it from possibly taking the top spot. So I am going to put it ahead of the Mark 7R. And it will be our number 3. So that is our tier list. So we're going to go from top to bottom. We're going to go from the bottom tier, actually. This EOS here, these weird-looking things that I don't even know what they are. This one looks like a Fiat. I don't even think it's a Volkswagen. And we got a couple more EOSs on the bottom tier, the Mark II and Mark I base Golfs. On our third tier, we've got the Mark III base, the Mark III Cabrio, the Mark II GTI, and the Mark V Sport Wagon. On the second tier, we've got the Mark III wagon, the Mark III GTI, the Mark IV wagon, the Mark VI Sport Wagon, the Mark IV Cabrio, the Mark I GTI, the Mark V 2.5, the Mark 6 or Mark 7, excuse me. I think that's the 7 base, and we have the 7.5 base. Actually, that's the 7.5 base. So I'm gonna flip these two. 7 base, 7.5 base, the GTE, the Sport Wagon, Mark 6 2.5, the Mark 7 GTD. I'm gonna say that is the GTD. Mark 4 GTI, Mark 5 GTI, Mark 6 GTI, 7.5 GTI, 7 GTI, and then on our top tier we have the GTI W12, the Mark 6 Golf R, the Mark 7 Golf R, the Mark 7 GTI Club Sport S, the Mark 5 R32, and the Mark 4 R32. So that is our list. So I hope you all enjoyed this fun little video talking about the tier list of Volkswagen. Hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the very next video. Take care, guys, and have a fantastic day.